Hello and welcome to the State of Shakespeare. I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
And today we're joined by Barry Edelstein. Hello, Barry.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Great. It's so good to have you here.
Great to be here with you.
Barry Edelstein is a stage director, producer, author, and educator who is widely recognized as one of the leading American authorities on the works of Shakespeare. Barry has directed nearly half of the Bard's plays. Since 2012, he's been serving as the artistic director of the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, where his directing credits include The Winter's Tale, Othello, and many more. He also directed All's Well That Ends Well as the inaugural production of Globe for All, a new producing platform that tours the works of Shakespeare to diverse communities throughout San Diego County. His lengthy creative resume includes director of the Shakespeare Initiative at the New York Public Theater from 2008 to 2012 and New York's Classic Stage Company from 1998 to 2003. He's worked with a who's who of notable actors, including Al Pacino, Gwyneth Paltrow, John Turturro, Uma Thurman, and many others. Barry has taught Shakespearean acting at the Juilliard School, NYU's graduate acting program, and the University of Southern California, and his book, Thinking Shakespeare, is the standard text on American Shakespearean acting. He is also the author of Bardisms, Shakespeare for All Occasions. So welcome, Barry.
Thank you very much. Oh man, it's agonizing to listen to all of that, It's like hearing, you guys know, it's like listening to your own voice when recorded, There's something horrifying about going through all of that. As proud as I am, just tough to listen to sometimes.
Yeah, we were talking to someone, I can't remember who said that, they didn't really have a career. They just had a bunch of stuff they did.
That's good. I like it. No, it's a career, and I tell my students the verb to career means to bang around aimlessly, the drunken driver careered down the highway. Right. And that's what I feel like, I did a little of this, a little of that. Shakespeare's been in the middle of it though. That's one thing. A lot of Shakespeare in there.
So speaking of careering around, here we are in 2021 and we're all careering around. How is 2021 treating you in the world of Shakespeare from your perspective?
Oh my God, we thought 2020, when 2020 went away on December 31st, we all thought we could breathe a sigh of relief. And then 2021 just took us deeper into the soup, It's been a really, really tough time, I'll be honest with you. The impact on the field of American institutional theater has been profound and is going to take a long time to recover from. At the Old Globe, we've experienced a $15 million reduction in revenue since the closure in the middle of March. And that's like half of the institution just gone. Now, this means people out of work, 150 something of our staff on the unemployment rolls, freelance artists, writers, actors, designers who don't have work. It's a grim picture. Now, there's been some good news. Number one, we've pivoted to all kinds of digital work, just as you guys are wonderfully doing. And, we're putting material up on every kind of virtual platform imaginable. And this has been really interesting in terms of the reach that it's had. The radio and the internet get to exponentially more people than the live stage does, which is a basically local and finite form. So there's that good news, interesting. There's the philanthropic community in San Diego, which has just been astonishing. In an absence of earned revenue, contributed revenue has become extremely important. And the folks who support the arts in this amazing city have dug deep and they've done very innovative and interesting things. That's been wonderful. And then the third part is the social justice revolution that's taking place in every sector of American society and in particular in the arts. And the Globe's been deeply involved in that. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. It just feels like that's very weighed down by a certain kind of darkness that we all hope will lift soon. So that's the report.
I'm an optimist by nature, and I feel that there's going to be a creative explosion once this is all over, much like Shakespeare after the plague came up with some amazing shows, amazing plays. So that's my optimistic hope, but that doesn't take away what's happened over the past 10 months.
I share that optimism. I really do. And I think there is going to be, just like Shakespeare showed, there's going to be a kind of roaring return of people to the theater. I just hope that we don't forget the pain that we've experienced, because it's a unique opportunity to learn from. You know, we experienced the pain that we did because there were vulnerabilities there that we weren't paying attention to. You know, there were vulnerabilities there in terms of how artists are paid and valued in our society. And so when it shut down, they were left uniquely vulnerable. There were issues in terms of how healthcare is provided to the people who work in this sector. And so when the pandemic hit, our sector was uniquely vulnerable. And of course, there was, real questions of racial equity and of systemic biases that we weren't paying attention to, and now we are. So I hope that when the lights turn back on, we celebrate, we dance, we sing, we hold hands. I hope all of that happens, but I hope we don't forget the hard lessons that we've learned.
So can I ask you frankly where you think we are and situated? Right now, we're recording this in very early 2021. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. The vaccines have been approved and are very slowly being rolled out. It feels
I'm getting
like
one today.
You are.
Wow.
All right, Jim. That's great. Yeah. Well, depending on where you are in the country, this is kind of an uneven process. And I think for most people, it feels like an interminable sort of purgatory situation where, although there's hope, there's no telling how long it will take for us to return to any sense of normalcy, if there is any such thing anymore. So my question for you is, do you feel like you are still in this space of crisis management, or maybe even bracing for worse things to come? Or are you able at this point to begin to chart a course forward over the next year or 2 or 3 or 5 years?
We feel that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I do feel that that's where we are, because the country lost so much time getting ready to roll these vaccines out, because there's so much disinformation, because there's so much disunity. But then I do see the vaccine starting to roll out and people starting to feel confident to come out again. I look at places like Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, where they've beat this thing, and restaurants are jammed and concert halls are packed and theaters are getting full. So I do believe that that's going to happen, but we're not quite there yet. And a couple of things that I think we really have to keep in mind. You know, we at the Globe, we're in touch with public health authorities in San Diego County very regularly, and they've got other stuff that they're thinking about. So we call them up and we say, what are the rules going to be for theater? You know, and it's like, hey, scram, you know? And I can't even be upset about that, because I'm a citizen and I want to know that people are going to have a hospital bed to go to if, God forbid, they get sick. So this is what I mean about not forgetting the darkness and the pain that we've been through. And, you know, I've been talking about this in terms of Shakespeare, because to me, the great expressions of Shakespeare are the 4 late plays, The Tempest, Cymbeline, Pericles, and The Winter's Tale. These are, to me, the summit of Shakespeare's achievement. And what those 4 plays do is they manage to combine loss with renewal. They manage to find a happy ending in the way that the comedies do, but not by banishing the blocking figure or the enemy in the way that the comedies do, right? At the end of Much Ado About Nothing, the bad guy's out of town. The end of As You Like It, the bad guy's in his cave, right? The end of Twelfth Night, Malvolio goes stalking out, and that's it. And now we're safe and we can have our wedding again. But the end of the 4 late plays, the bad stuff is still in the room, and yet we figure out a way to be happy, right? Leontes gets his wife back after 16 years, and they have their reunion, but their dead son does not come back to life. Dead Antigonus, who's been torn apart by a bear, does not come back to life. And so there's this dual consciousness of being able to move forward and being able to celebrate that we've survived a calamity, and being able to enjoy the grace of God, or whatever higher power you want to call it, that's given us a second chance. And yet the loss is still there. And I think the theater field is going to have to figure that part out. In all the ways that we've been talking about Shakespeare's ability to survive the plague, all rightly, that's the part that most appeals to me. I hope that we can embrace that wisdom that Shakespeare gained in those 4 late plays and say, yeah, we're going to rebuild. Yes, we're going to celebrate. Yeah, we're going to have a big dinner together and talk about what just happened. But also, we're going to remember, by that point, 500,000 dead Americans. By that point, the consciousness of a legacy of racial exclusion that's just embarrassing to our field. We've got to find a way to carry that forward with us as we turn the lights back on.
Well, that's so beautifully put. Thank you, Barry.
Lovely.
I know that you've responded in a number of proactive ways to these particular challenges. Some of the ways that you indicated, for example, the Thinking Shakespeare, the Sonnet series, which is available for all to view, and then also you've got an interesting production of Hamlet coming up. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, the pandemic happened in so many different chapters. At the beginning of it, we were all saying, oh, we'll be closed for 2 weeks and then we'll reopen, and then suddenly it was, oh, it's going to be 2 months. And then, oh my God, just one worsening development after another. And in my life, when bad things happen, I read Shakespeare. When good things happen, I read Shakespeare. And when the pandemic hit, I was thinking about the sonnets, and there's a lot of these poems about being isolated and being separated by great distances, and yet our ability to think our way into a connection is miraculous and beautiful. Also, they're short, they're only 14 lines. And I thought, well, I can reach out to the community at the Old Globe and try and forge some kind of connection by maybe doing something with these wonderful poems. And I had no idea what it would turn into. I turned my house into a video studio, and we turned the Old Globe into a new media company and did all these experiments, not just my Shakespeare thing, but our arts engagement work is now going to prisons up and down the state of California on the prison closed circuit television network. Who even knew they had such a thing? Normally, we send teaching artists into state correctional facilities around San Diego County, 2 or 3 of them. And, they drive out. There's one out in the desert 2 hours from here, and a teaching artist drives out, goes into the prison, spends time with 10 inmates, teaches a Shakespeare lesson, comes home. But now we're making these recorded episodes that are going all around the state of California, these extraordinary transformations. So yeah, I did that sonnet thing, and suddenly I'm getting emails from people in England and New Zealand and people in every state in the country, and reckoning with the fact that the theater now suddenly has this kind of reach is a really, really interesting thing. Because normally, if you want to participate at the Old Globe, you buy a ticket, you show up in Balboa Park at 8 p.m., you sit in H101, and that's the experience. That's all done now. Now I can watch Barry's sonnet thing at any time, anywhere, and enjoy a connection to the art of theater. So we're all reckoning with that. That's what led us to the Hamlet thing. We went to our friends at KPBS, which is the local NPR affiliate here in San Diego, and said, we've got this production of Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. It's the annual holiday show at the Globe. It's very important to our business model, but it's also been going for 23 years. And it's a big part of holiday season in San Diego, is taking your family to go see the Grinch at the Old Globe. And so we thought, what are we going to do with this thing? Are we going to do a Zoom version of it? Are we going to get into a studio and film it somehow? And we went and talked to the radio station, and they said, great, let's do it, but let's do more than one thing. And I said, okay, well, I did this Hamlet back in 2017. What about that? So we're going to work on that. It's like looking at the idea of theater and putting it in a kaleidoscope and suddenly seeing all these different angles on it that you never imagined before. And it's been fun.
It is certainly challenging. And the question that I always have when, we're teaching, we both teach, and teaching acting through Zoom is a challenge. But, as an audience member, if I'm going to see theater, I'm experiencing a live event. What's the gain of seeing a live theatrical performance versus a film?
Well, they're obviously, as you guys know, completely different things. And I would never argue for an instant that these digital forms are substitutes. They're not. They're placeholders. I think what we're going to find is that there are artists who have figured out these media and are doing extraordinary things there, and really what we're watching is the birth of a new form, which is this sort of hybrid digital theatrical art form, which I completely embrace. I just don't describe it as theater. It's something else. It's a quasi-theatrical form. And some of it is fantastic and some of it is boring. But sometimes live theater is boring and live theater can be fantastic, you know? So it's a real range of stuff. It does not capture the same essence of actually being in the room with other people. And the reason is that magic superpower of theater, of community. That's the thing that makes theater what it is, which is it gathers people together in one space and makes them one unit for this period of time. I'm no sociologist and I'm no anthropologist, but I have to believe that a lot of the fracturing that we're seeing so violently around the country is because people aren't gathering together. And I don't just mean in theaters, I mean with families, you know, at the store. We are essentially social beings, and this virus has made us isolate from each other. And the only forum we have to gather on is social media, and it's not the same. So there's all this weird breakdown happening because the bonds of, I don't know what you want to call it, comity, polity, I don't know, some fancy word that make individuals into a community have been sundered by this vaccine. So that's the theater's thing. You bring 600 people together in the middle of Balboa Park, and you're sitting next to somebody who voted for the candidate that you loathe, but here you are together watching this thing, watching this story.
Loathing Malvolio.
Right, yes, right. That somehow transcends the differences and temporarily makes you, you know, and I want to be clear about this. I want to not make claims that are absurd. I don't believe that if those guys that stormed the Capitol had been subscribers to their local theater, they would have behaved differently. You know, I don't think that you can solve all of society's problems by throwing theater at it, but you can help a little. You know, you really can help a little. One of the first giant mentor figures that I had in my life was Joseph Papp. And he genuinely believed that there was no problem in human society that couldn't be made a little bit better by having some Shakespeare thrown at it, you know? And it was, on the one hand, this very naive, old school liberal idea, you know, sort of 1930s liberal idea. On the other hand, there's something deeply beautiful in it because it was small in scale. I might change one person's mind just a little bit about one thing, and it cumulatively starts to build. So it's that. It's this sense of the theater's power of bringing strangers together and making them a collective, and the theater's power of asking people together to have a shared experience that will be why people come back, and that is the thing that these digital experiments struggle with the most.
I feel like there was an awful lot of the theatrical in what we witnessed. Was it only last week? You know, when I saw the pictures of the rioters storming the Capitol and documenting what they were doing on social media in real time and wearing absurd costumes, it felt to me like what they were doing was engaging in some sort of cosplay, but with real weapons and real world implications and consequences that they probably in the moment had no awareness of.
Well, you know, here, I don't mean to be glib, but they could use a better costume designer. You know?
Yes.
I think they need to call up United Scenic Artists and take a look at their costume design. You know, it's interesting. The storming of the Capitol is the riot in Julius Caesar after the funeral orations, you know? And so I just went, and, you know, you see the tear down benches, you know, and you read this language in there of Shakespeare describing what the riot is like. And you look at the film, the video of what's going on there in Washington, and it's the same stuff. And it's kind of grim that, wow, 400 years later, and it's the same thing. I suppose you could look at that and say, you see, Shakespeare was brilliant and prescient. On the other hand, you look at it and go, oh man, we haven't really moved ahead much.
We haven't learned. We've not evolved.
We really haven't. We really haven't learned. I don't know. You know, that thing was so traumatic to witness. it's going to take a long, long, long time for all of us to metabolize what that experience was. I think that when an eruption of violence like that happens, I was in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and it's a generation later, and New York is still reacting to that, as is the rest of the United States, still reacting to that. And I think this is going to be one of those moments. And again, I think what the theater can do to respond to that is on a very granular kind of basis. I've devoted my life to this art form, and I adore it, and I believe in it as the greatest and most efficacious thing in the world. But I don't think that the theater has the power to change an entire society instantly. What it can do is touch individual people. We can on the stage of the Old Globe, we can model an America that we want to live in, and an audience can see it and see that it's beautiful, and the needle gets moved just a tiny bit.
I couldn't agree more. And to your point earlier about community, I think that the theater, just one of the things is it lives in questions. And, as an audience member, you walk out of a play, whether it's Shakespeare or any other play, and there are questions, and it foments discussion. And that's something that social media does not foment. It foments echo chambers. But I'll never forget, after a production of Oleana, a wife turning to a husband and saying, well, she was awful. And the husband turning to the wife and saying, I don't know, I think he was pretty bad. And right there, the discussion begins.
Right.
And you can't ignore it. You can't just go to your own little echo chamber and talk about it. So I think that's the power of theater. And certainly through the ages, people have known about the power of theater. Most famously, Oliver Cromwell, shortly after Shakespeare's death, shut it down because theater can be dangerous.
Yeah.
But moving on to a little bit more Shakespeare, Barry, not to go deep dive into your past, but how did you develop that love and knowledge of Shakespeare that has been with you for all of this time?
Wow, that's a great question, and there are a couple pieces to it, because I've thought about it, because I have young children. I have an 8-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, and I'm watching as they find the things that they love in their life, and it's interesting to see how it happens, sort of osmosis, and they randomly bump into things, some of which resonate with them and some of them don't. I had great teachers. That's number one. I was in a public school system in northern New Jersey where there was robust arts activity. Subsequent budget cuts have reduced the scale of that, sadly. But the proximity of the community I grew up in to New York City meant that the teachers were people who had working artistic lives in New York, and their day job was teaching public school out in the suburbs. So there was really good theater programming in the public school system of Fair Lawn, New Jersey, and Bergen County. And so I was exposed to a lot of theater. Plus, my folks were cultured and would take the family into New York City to see theater. It was Broadway, and it was Broadway musicals or celebrity shows. I didn't discover off-Broadway till I was, an adult. I didn't discover the art theater of, La Mama and the Open Theater and Mabou Mines and those companies until I was college aged. But I was around theater as a kid and had good Shakespeare teachers too. So I would read this stuff and try and figure it out. And then there was like a light bulb moment. I was in a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream in high school, and the language just spoke to me. And the language resonated with me in a way that seemed to go somewhere beyond the normal, beyond just regular language. It seemed to have spiritual resonance in my life. And, I've spoken with friends a lot about this. These are canonical texts that are very old and that encode universal, ethical, moral kind of values. There's something, I don't know, spiritual about them. Something, many people treat them as religious texts, and I don't necessarily, but I do recognize that they have the same effect on me as spiritual literature does. So that was it. That was it. I was a goner at that point. And then I just sort of, dove into it through college, where again, I ran into great teachers. I never knew what theater directing even was as a kid. And I had teachers I went to Tufts University, where wonderful teachers looked at me and said, I see in you the spark of somebody who might want to think about directing. Such a gift to have a teacher who sees something in you that you don't even know is there and says, here's something that you might want to pursue. So I started directing when I was an undergrad, and then that was it. There was no turning back. The next step in my life was in graduate school, and I went to Oxford, immersed myself in Shakespeare, in Oxfordshire, and driving to Warwickshire to go to the Royal Shakespeare Company every weekend, going to London to see theater. Was just a stunning, stunning period of time in my life, and that kind of sealed the deal. And it's been all Shakespeare all the time, plus some other stuff, other theater stuff too. But Shakespeare's been the spine of my life experience and my spiritual existence and my soulful existence ever since.
I love the idea of the spiritual nature of the text. I think that's what keeps me going too.
Yeah, we all have an appetite to connect with something larger than ourselves. I shouldn't say we all do. My own experience is that I yearn for a connection to something that is larger than myself. I'm Jewish, and I'm not terribly observant, but I belong to a synagogue. I go. I mark the rituals every year. It helped me very much when my father passed away. So I do understand that sense of connecting via text, because that's what it is, right? The people of the book, it's connecting to that larger thing via text. And Shakespeare is a very clear equivalent to that. I can read a passage of Shakespeare and feel like I have touched a current that is emanating from something larger somewhere.
The piece that you selected to share with us today is from Hamlet. It's from Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 2, a very famous speech. Of all of the speeches that you could have chosen, why did you choose this one for this moment?
Oh my God. I mean, it's like going to an all-you-can-eat banquet in Las Vegas and going, I'll have the cheeseburger, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't in a sushi mood. So honestly, the question, I'm sure you guys get this all the time. What's your favorite Shakespeare play? The answer is the one I'm working on at the moment. So I'm in Hamlet right now as we prepare this thing for the radio. The What a Piece of Work is a Man speech is, I think, one of the dark horses of Hamlet. People think about to be or not to be, and people think about speak the speech, I pray you as I pronounced it to you. People don't necessarily, or alas, poor Yorick, right? What a Piece of Work is a Man is, to me, kind of underrated, a wonderful, beautiful speech. But it also goes to the things that we've been talking about. And I think about this moment that human beings are so glorious, and human beings are capable of such extraordinary things. And yet they're also capable of painting their face and putting a Viking hat on and defecating in the US Capitol, Like so the weird dichotomy of the beauty of man, the paragon of animals, and yet the miserable disappointment of how awful people can be, just was in the air, on my mind.
I agree with you. It is a beautiful and a very spiritual piece of text, but it's also in prose, which is always interesting to me. And to me, has always linked very strongly with another beautiful piece of prose text that Hamlet speaks later in the play, the readiness is all. Because I think that there's a spiritual nature to that as well. And I think you wouldn't get to the Providence speech without this speech.
That's right. There's a divinity that shapes our ends.
Yeah.
Rough hew them how we will. Yeah. There is this sense of Hamlet trying to figure out the role of Providence in his life, the special providence, right, in his life. And this gets to that. That on the other hand, what I do like about it is that it's humanistic. It's about man. It's about man and the choices that we make. that we've been given this gift of free will, and what we choose to do with it is up to us. And will we make a mess or won't we? Yeah, the prose question is so interesting. Why Hamlet says all the amazing things that he does in this highly wrought verse, and then suddenly he comes out with these chunks that are formless, equally beautiful in prose. People always say, well, is there a rule? Is it this? Yeah, if it's a month without an R in it, it's prose. If it's I don't know. Certain things somehow in Shakespeare's imagination require a kind of discipline of form that move them into verse, and others seem to overspill the boundaries of that 10-beat line and take on a different kind of expression. Although we have to remember, when you go into the period printing of these plays, the guys in the publishing houses would run out of space on a page and would set up 50 lines of verse as 30 lines of prose, because they were coming to the end of a page. So, let the buyer beware that sometimes this stuff is an accident of the technology of printing in the 16th and 17th century, and not necessarily something that's intentional. Okay, so this is Act 2, Scene 2 of Hamlet. And I'm cutting it off before Rosencrantz makes a joke, because that's the next part of it. Okay. I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth, forgone all custom of exercises, and indeed it goes so heavily with my disposition that this goodly frame, the earth, seems to me a sterile promontory, this most excellent canopy, the air. Look you, this brave or hanging firmament, this majestical roof fretted with gold and fire. Why, it appeareth nothing to me but a foul and pestilent congregation of vapors. What a piece of work is a man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights not me.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Oh my God. What is this quintessence of dust? Oy. The guy, you think about this guy alone in his garret with his quill pen and his ink and his paper. And you just have to ask yourself, like, what bolt of lightning was he touching with his hand that brought this expression through him? It's stunning. It's spectacular. And for all the politics and for all the theory that has accreted around him over centuries, it's just beauty. It's beauty. That's what draws me to it again and again. That's why people watch Hamlet 10 times over the course of their life. That's why they buy $100 ticket and sit there for 3 hours to watch it, because there is just a simple, magnificent beauty in this language that we want to be near.
Couldn't agree more.
When I hear you read this, I'm struck at how many different levels it resonates with. You can imagine, as you say, Shakespeare with his hand, touching the lightning in the bottle as these words come to him, these profound words about the human condition. And at the same time, you can picture Hamlet, the character, with his audience of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and maybe being free to speak truth because he's dissembling as well. And in that moment, there's that dichotomy of him playing mad and then speaking these profound truths at the same time. And then thinking about the actor playing Hamlet in this wooden O on this stage, surrounded by stinking vapors issuing from the groundlings, and that present communion that was happening between the actor and the audience at that time, that electric dichotomy of the actor playing the character but also directly addressing the audience and taunting them and having perhaps some fun with that. And it just works on so many beautiful levels.
I know, it's so great, and you imagine what would it have been like to hear that for the first time, to just stand there and hear a guy say that. And we see it, I mean, the famous Herman Melville thing about Shakespeare's being born on the banks of Ohio at this very moment, there are writers who are doing this, and we go to the theater and we see a new play and we'll hear a turn of phrase that just makes us gasp with stunned disbelief at the fact that a human being can express words in that order. It's special. It's interesting that you say that. I directed the play recently, a couple of years ago, and we tried, he's playing mad, he doesn't mean any of this. We couldn't make that work. And I think about all the productions of Hamlet that I've seen, and this speech always feels like a sudden revelation of truth, that he doesn't do it as a manipulation of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Somehow at this moment, his essential self opens up, and this terrible black vision of melancholy and depression comes out of him in an authentic way. I'd be really interested to see if somebody could figure out how to make it something other than that. To me, it just feels like such a deeply personal expression of where he's at. My favorite thing about it actually is, "But wherefore I know not." I don't know why. And the first line of The Merchant of Venice, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad," right? This thing, Stephen Greenblatt famously talks about Hamlet, that what Shakespeare's extraordinary leap in Hamlet is removing motivation from it, because the source material that he had, the old Hamlet play and the novel, the novella from the Scandinavia that he had read, everything's really motivated, and you follow, you know exactly why Hamlet does this and why Hamlet does that. And Shakespeare stripped all that stuff out. And so that's why the play is so mysterious to us. And Hamlet even asked Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, "Do you think you can pluck the heart of my mystery?" He constantly brings into the discussion the fact that his motives are unclear, and he himself doesn't even know why he's feeling the way he feels. So that thing I have of late, "But wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth." I don't know why I feel so weird. It's so modern. It feels so like right now, I don't know why I even feel this way. And that's superb and spectacular about it, And it's why I think one of the reasons why we turn to it again and again and again, because we think maybe this time we'll figure him out.
Yeah.
Maybe this time we'll actually figure out what's going on with this guy. Nope, we never do.
No. I also think that speaks so much to instinct. And then if you want to bring it down to whether it's an actor or a director, trusting your instinct. And, I don't know why I made this choice. And being able to live in that place, in that question. And I know that in this particular moment with Hamlet, he's melancholy, but I'm looking for that spark, and then it comes, and I don't know where that comes from. And that's such a human moment.
It's also what's really wonderful about it. And, this goes, Garrett, to your earlier point, which is that, see, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they think there are answers to questions. They're two folks who think there's an explanation. That's why they're here. The king and the queen summoned them and said, "Go find out what's eating our son. You've known him since you were in college together. Go find out what's bothering him." And so they think there actually is an answer. And what Hamlet knows is there are certain things in life to which there are no answers, And the wonderful drama of the exchanges between Hamlet and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is that you're seeing these two worldviews, which is this kind of concrete sense, empirical sense of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern thinking there must be an explanation, and Hamlet's more ineffable sense of going, nope, there is no explanation. We just have to live in that. We have to live in the fact that we cannot know. And that's so great that the two of them clash against each other in that way.
I love that explanation. I think it's very beautiful. Is there a world in which Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are anticipating the next thing to come out of Hamlet's mouth to be, I think my uncle killed my father.
I don't know. See, here's one of the fun things that I enjoyed about the play that I never knew. As much as I know this play, and as long as I've studied this play, when I directed it, I found something out, which is that Claudius never finds out how Hamlet figured it out. Never finds out. Claudius goes to his death knowing that Hamlet figured out that he killed his brother, but not knowing how. Why? Because Claudius couldn't imagine that a ghost showed up, right? Because how does Hamlet know? Hamlet knows because his father's ghost came and told him. It was a perfect crime. Old Hamlet was asleep in his orchard, right? Claudius snuck in, poured the poison in his ear, and then said, well, a snake killed him. He was bitten by a poisonous snake. And, okay, how would Hamlet know what really happened? Right. There is no earthly explanation. And the wonderful actor Cornell Womack, who played Claudius in the production that we did, we talked about this a lot, is that, and as he's dying, he's looking at Hamlet going, how died? Can't know, can't know. Right. So Hamlet can embrace the fact. And of course, we've seen productions where the ghost is a figment of Hamlet's imagination. Right. That's a typical thing where actually that isn't what happened, is that Hamlet surmises somehow what Claudius did and pursues it. We didn't go that way. We went that the ghost is actually real and gave him. And it was a really fun thing, because then the whole fight between Hamlet and Claudius takes on this kind of other dimension of Claudius knowing there's something about this guy. This guy figured this out. How did he figure it out? Is he Sherlock Holmes? What? There's no way he could possibly know. And yet Hamlet knows. I love that about it, right? And this is the wonderful thing about being a director, is that you learn things about these plays that you could never have figured out without. I remember this really specifically. Grantham Coleman played Hamlet, and Cornell Womack, Claudius, and I, and we're sitting there talking one day and going, hey, wait a minute. Does Claudius ever know that the ghost came and talked to Hamlet? No, he doesn't. He doesn't know this. So Claudius has to die completely unaware of how Hamlet managed to figure it out. So great.
Yeah. And again, that's here we are back at this speech. Not only does Hamlet not know why he's lost all his mirth, but Claudius is trying to figure out, how does Hamlet know this? I don't know this.
Yeah. How do we know the things we know?
Right. So living in the questions.
How do we know the things we know? Right? We don't. We can't. We sit in the uncertainty of it. It drives some of us mad, and others it doesn't. Horatio knows that there's a ghost of Hamlet's father running around, and he's got the whole thing. And so that's why Hamlet says to him, you got to tell the story, right? You've got to tell the story. And so you get the other version of the production where Fortinbras comes in at the end and murders Horatio so that he never gets the chance to tell the story, right? People do all sorts of, it's just wonderful. The play is endlessly fascinating, and one of these, and I get to do it again on radio. And the production that we did at the Globe, although I cut it heavily, it was still 3 hours. On KPBS, we're not going to have 3 hours of time, so I've cut it more. And there again, it becomes a different kind of play. I've cut in the production we did live, we kept the Fortinbras story, but that's a good 15 minutes of the play if you cut that out. So I just cut it out, no Fortinbras. And it's a completely different play. It becomes a domestic tragedy without a political dimension, without a kind of international intrigue dimension. So I'm really excited to go back into it and do it again. It'll be on the radio we're trying to get it out right around Shakespeare's birthday of April 23rd. So, and I start Thursday, starting a couple days, taping this thing.
That's got to be exciting.
Yeah.
We will definitely put a link into this production on our website.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that one of the critical things about doing a Hamlet on radio is the soundscape.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that. So Curtis Moore wrote a musical score for the production that we did live, and everything that we needed, sound effects, a gun, a cannon shot, whatever, was all created musically. So we're gonna keep that. And Lindsay Jones, the sound designer, has been doing a lot of radio drama in the pandemic. it's a very interesting thing that's happened is a lot of theatrical sound designers have moved over to these digital forms. And when we decided to do this radio Hamlet, I said, wow, I need somebody who knows what a radio drama is. I'm sure there's the BBC, they do it all the time,
Right.
to this very day, they're making hours and hours and hours every month of radio drama. But in the United States, it went the way of the dinosaur a long time ago. And so we've been talking a lot about what we want it to sound like. There's also the problem of storytelling. In the sword fight, for example, there's this moment where Hamlet has to discover that Laertes' blade is sharpened at the point, right? Unbaited. Is that what it is? Yeah, sword unbaited. It's supposed to be blunted at the end for safety if you're doing just an exposition match, right? And he discovered, and so there's this piece of business that happens where Hamlet picks up Laertes' sword, discovers that it's sharpened, then he keeps that sword and gives his own sword back to Laertes. And there's no language in Shakespeare's play about it. They don't say, I see that this blade is pointy. Here, I'm going to keep yours. You take mine, right?
Right.
You don't need to, because on stage, the audience sees all that happen. Well, so we're going, well, how do you do that on the radio? Interestingly, I found this Orson Welles radio Hamlet from the 1930s, and you hear some guy go, look, they change rapiers, because he's going, how am I going to make the audience understand that they switched swords, right? And so there's some extra that they brought in for the day.
That's brilliant.
Right? So these are absolutely, what do you want it to sound like? What ear do you do? We had, an eerie soundscape when the ghost showed up, and it was all created musically. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about that. Also, how do you use the microphone, right? I don't know, we're going to start rehearsal in a couple of days, and you think, well, maybe Hamlet's soliloquy should be like, to be or not to be, that is the question, and you really exploit the radio medium to sort of bring it intimately into the audience's ears. I don't know, it's like a new world.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I mean, that's a fun exploration.
Yeah. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And again, we started out talking about the pandemic, silver linings, right? Suddenly I'm exploring a brand new form. Maybe we'll keep doing radio drama. Maybe there will be a new vein of radio drama happening in the American theater as a result of this thing. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And also how that informs your work on stage when you get back to a live theater.
Totally. Absolutely true.
So we have to wrap up real quick, but I have one last question that we have to ask you.
Sure.
Since you have been on the forefront of both Shakespeare production and Shakespeare education for so many years, what would be your piece of advice for a young, up-and-coming Shakespearean actor?
Oh my goodness. The advice, first, the guy lasted 400 years, he's going to last 400 more. So hang in there, ups and downs and periods of stasis and periods of movement, but hang in there. Shakespeare's shown me the entire world and has enriched my life in countless ways. So I recommend you hitch your wagon to it. But the concrete advice I would give to people is what Hemmings and Condell said in the first folio, which is read him therefore and again and again. Read him therefore and again and again. Just read it, carry it around. Abraham Lincoln had a copy of Shakespeare within reach wherever he was. Kevin Kline, when he was a young actor, kept a copy of Hamlet in his back pocket 24/7, 365, and sitting on the subway would just read a couple pages, Just read it, and it will unfold and open up its mysteries, this beautiful canon of literature.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a lovely piece of advice. I think, Garrett, you had one question that you wanted to ask.
We were... Yeah, why not? Why not? I think that's a beautiful place to leave it, to be perfectly honest. And this probably won't make it into the podcast, but as Jim and I were talking about questions, I said, let's just hit him with this one. Who is your favorite student and why?
Oh my God, you can't be serious. Like asking which of my two children I love more.
Yeah, so go ahead.
My God. who's my favorite student? That I can only answer it by way of saying that the fact that I've been able to have a career as an educator alongside my career as an artist has enhanced it. My career as an artist has benefited enormously from the students that I've had who have asked questions and forced me to explain myself and revealed aspects of the work to me in ways that I would never have been able to see myself. So I don't know. They seem to me like one beautiful, breathing, evolving body of people, and not a series of individuals, but a collective of wondrous minds and hearts and souls.
Barry Edelstein, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, gentlemen, that was so much fun. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on your great work. And, I just admire what you're doing tremendously. Thanks so much. Good luck. Be well. Be safe.
You too.
I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
And thank you for listening to The State of Shakespeare. And that's a wrap, Barry. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, boys.
All right.
Thank you, fellas. How great that was fantastic. Thank you.
It was a lot of fun, and we really look forward to hearing the Radio Hamlet.
Oh yeah.
I'll be listening for that final fight scene.
I know. To see how I'm going to solve it.
They switched swords.
Look, they've changed rapiers. You should listen to the Orson Welles one because it's really interesting. He cut the hell out of it. And then what's so hilarious about it's the Mercury Theater. And it's before Citizen Kane, but I think after Julius Caesar, I'm not sure. Anyway, he's got everybody talking 700 miles an hour. And then you get to the soliloquies, which is him playing Hamlet, and it's slow. Oh, that is too solid flesh with that voice of his, that incredible voice. And then everybody else is going, blah, 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 blah. And then he just it's hilarious because it gives you total glimpse of what that theater company was.
Yeah.
It was just this showcase for this genius, and he could do whatever he wanted. It's absolutely hysterical.
Yeah. Well,
thanks for the tip. We're going to check it out.
Yeah, you got to check it out.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's pretty bad, really. It's pretty bad. But he's amazing because he's got that, this instinctive connection to Shakespeare. God knows where it came from. Right. This kid who grew up dirt poor. He's born in Ireland, dirt poor. Somehow he had this instinctive connection to it.
It's the language again, right?
And that instrument, that voice, God. So, yeah, if you Google Orson Welles Radio Hamlet, you'll be able to find it.
Totally.
Fellas.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Stay in touch, okay?
Yeah.
Cheers.
Good luck.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.